There's a type of person that almost nobody truly understands. They are present. They observe everything. They listen carefully. But they speak very little. They do not interrupt. They do not fight for space. They do not try to impress. And precisely because of that, they are often underestimated. We live in a culture that associates value with visibility. Those who talk a lot seem confident. Those who expose themselves seem secure. Those who dominate the conversation seem dominant. Silence in this noisy world is often interpreted as weakness, excessive shyness, or even a lack of intelligence. But that interpretation reveals more about the one judging than the one being judged. The truth is that silence is rarely empty. Most of the time, it is too full. When someone speaks little, that person's mind is usually operating at a different rhythm, not slower, deeper. While many people use speech as a way of thinking out loud, these individuals think before they speak. Thought happens internally in layers, and only afterward. If it makes sense, does it cross their lips? From the perspective of analytical psychology, silence is often an expression of genuine introversion. And here, it is important to undo a common misconception. Introversion is not shyness. Jung made this very clear. An introvert is not someone who fears people, but someone whose psychic energy flows primarily inward. They are nourished by the inner world. Ideas, images, symbols, associations. The external world is not avoided, but filtered. That is why people who speak little usually observe more. And those who observe more notice patterns that go unnoticed by others. Micro-expressions, subtle contradictions, changes in tone of voice, inconsistencies between what is said and what is felt. While most people are too busy trying to be heard, these individuals are understanding the game. On a neurological level, this appears as well. People who speak less tend to have a longer processing time before responding. The brain does not react automatically. It evaluates, cross-checks information, weighs consequences. In simple terms, they do not respond out of impulse. They respond out of meaning. That explains why, when they finally speak, they often make an impact. A single sentence can silence an entire room, not because it is loud, but because it is precise. Not because it is long, but because it is true. There's also another aspect, deeper and less comfortable, that almost nobody mentions. Many people who speak little learned early in life that speaking too much was not safe. At some point, their words were ignored, ridiculed, or used against them. Silence then stopped being merely a trait and became protection. But protection does not mean weakness. It means adaptation. The human psyche is extremely intelligent. When it realizes that the environment does not welcome expression, it pulls the energy inward. It creates a richer, more self-sufficient inner world. This process, when it does not become pathological, produces individuals with great capacity for reflection, symbolic imagination, and emotional depth. This is where the shadow enters the scene. Jung said that everything not consciously lived ends up being pushed into the shadow. In very talkative people, the shadow often contains silence, introspection, and fear of being alone. In silent people, the shadow often holds a powerful voice, intense ideas, creative impulses that still have not found a safe space to emerge. That is why these people's silence is not the absence of content. It is containment. There's also an almost alchemical dimension to this process. In Hermeticism, the principle of withdrawal precedes any true transformation. Nothing is transmuted in noise. Silence is the vessel where change happens. It is in retreat that the raw material of experience is cooked, refined, and reorganized. When someone speaks little, they are often, unconsciously, in this state of inner gestation. Thoughts have not yet been born. Words have not yet matured. And forcing speech would be like pulling an unripe fruit from a tree. This leads us to an essential point. Not every silence wants to be broken. Some silences want to be respected. Modern society has an almost pathological difficulty with silence. It creates discomfort because it forces the individual to encounter themselves. In a conversation, when someone becomes silent, a mirror is created. The other person sees themselves, hears themselves, perceives themselves. And not everyone can tolerate that. That is why people who speak little often provoke extreme reactions. They are either idealized as mysterious or dismissed as lacking presence. Both projections say more about the one projecting than the one receiving them. In social neuroscience, there is something called cognitive economy. The brain tries to spend as little energy as possible. Speaking requires energy. Maintaining narratives, sustaining personas, constantly justifying oneself. All of this consumes mental resources. People who speak little often choose, consciously or unconsciously, not to waste energy on what they consider irrelevant. These individuals tend to choose their battles, conversations, and even relationships more carefully. It is not coldness, but discernment. They know that every word creates a bond, an expectation, a consequence, and not every bond is worth the price. There is also a factor of identity. Silent people often build their sense of who I am less through external validation and more through internal coherence. They do not need to constantly narrate their existence in order to feel that it is real. In this case, silence is not the absence of identity, but its stability. This connects directly with individuation. The process of becoming who one truly is, for Jung, requires inner listening. It requires time. It requires silence. People who speak little are often closer to this process than they realize. But it is important to say something honestly. Silence can also become a prison. When a person identifies with it too much, when they turn not speaking into a rigid identity, they may end up suffocating their own voice. What was once protection becomes blockage. What was once introspection becomes isolation. The difference between conscious silence and defensive silence is subtle, but profound. In the first, the person chooses when to speak. In the second, they avoid speaking. In the first, there is contained power. In the second, there is accumulated fear. And the most curious thing is that, many times, people who speak little do not struggle to express themselves. They struggle to expose themselves. Those are completely different things. To express is to communicate content. To expose is to place yourself at risk. These people know, even if they cannot explain it, that speaking is revealing oneself. And revealing oneself in a world that judges quickly, listens poorly, and misunderstands easily can be dangerous. That is why they observe first. They test the ground. They feel the atmosphere. Only afterward, if there is genuine openness, does the voice appear. And when it appears, it is rarely superficial. There is something almost ritualistic about that moment, as if accumulated silence gives weight to words, as if every sentence carries not only meaning, but intention. That explains why, in groups, silent people frequently become informal leaders, counselors, figures of reference, not because of the volume of their voice, but because of its quality. And here's a point that almost nobody understands. People who speak little often hear the collective unconscious more clearly. They capture the emotional climate of the environment. They sense what was not said. They perceive tensions before they explode. They intuit changes before they become obvious. This is not mysticism. It is deep attention. The human brain is a pattern-detecting machine. The less occupied it is producing noise, the freer it becomes to notice subtle signals. That is why silence, in so many philosophical and spiritual traditions, is seen as a doorway to knowledge. But this knowledge is not intellectual. It is lived. People who speak little often feel more than they can explain, and they feel before they understand. This can generate internal conflicts, especially in a world that values quick explanations and ready-made answers. The person knows something is true, but has not yet found words for it, and they prefer silence over falsification. There's an integrity in that which is rarely recognized. At the same time, this type of person often becomes the target of projections. People fill silence with fantasies. They assume intentions, emotions, judgments that often do not even exist. Silence becomes a screen, and that can be heavy to carry. That is why silent people often develop a subtler sense of humor, a fine irony, almost invisible. It is a way of relieving tension without exposing themselves too much, a way of participating without dissolving themselves. When we look at it from this angle, we realize that speaking little is not an isolated trait. It is part of an entire psychic architecture, a way of being in the world, a rhythm of its own. The problem begins when the world tries to force these people to become something they are not. Speak more. Assert yourself. Show yourself. As if value existed in noise rather than presence. But presence does not depend on the quantity of words. It depends on density. And it is exactly that density that frightens people. Because those who speak little usually see too much. And those who see too much can no longer pretend. This seeing too much creates a very particular relationship with the world. The silent person begins to perceive not only what happens, but why it happens. They see the power games in conversations, the social masks, the small lies told to maintain an image. Over time, this generates a kind of existential exhaustion. Speaking starts to feel useless once one realizes that much of human communication is not seeking truth, but validation. In neuroscience, this connects to sensitivity to cognitive conflict. People who speak little often feel discomfort when they perceive inconsistency between discourse and reality. They notice when someone says something that does not match what they truly feel, or when a conversation revolves around superficialities that lead nowhere. The brain goes on alert, not out of fear, but because of misalignment. Silence then emerges as a way of not collaborating with emptiness. That is why many of these people feel displaced in environments that are excessively noisy, competitive, or performative, not because they do not know how to play the game, but because they do not see meaning in it. The psyche refuses to waste energy on what does not nourish it. From a symbolic perspective, silence has always been associated with the guardian of the threshold. In mythologies, the one who speaks little is usually the one who knows the most. The hermit, the wise old man, the reclusive alchemist, not because they have all the answers, but because they learn to listen to something most people ignore: time. People who speak little have a different relationship with psychological time. They do not feel pressured to fill every second with words. They can sustain emptiness. And sustaining emptiness is something extremely rare. Most people speak in order to escape from it. Silence, in this sense, functions as an inner mirror. It forces a person to confront their own thoughts, emotions, and contradictions. Those who cannot tolerate this need constant noise. Those who can tolerate it learn to know themselves. But this ability comes at a price. The more someone knows themselves, the less they become deceived. And being less deceived means losing certain social illusions. Empty conversations stop being entertaining. Social roles begin to seem artificial. Other people's expectations lose their power. It is common for silent people to be seen as hard to read. In reality, they simply do not surrender easily to other people's projections. They do not confirm expectations, and that creates discomfort. In Jungian psychology, when someone does not correspond to the role the collective expects, the collective reacts by trying to push them back into a familiar form. That is where labels like antisocial, strange, or closed off come from. Not because the person truly is those things, but because they do not facilitate the game of appearances. There's also a deep relationship between speaking little and feeling deeply. Silent people often have an intense emotional life, even if they do not show it. Unexpressed emotions do not disappear. They accumulate, transform, and become more sophisticated. That is why these individuals tend to be extremely empathetic, even if they are not outwardly expressive. They sense the emotional climate of an environment almost like an invisible field. They know when something is wrong before anyone says it. They know when someone is lying to themselves. They know when a decision will generate consequences nobody wants to face. This kind of perception can be heavy, and silence, once again, emerges as protection. From a hermetic perspective, there is an implicit maxim: what is precious does not expose itself carelessly. Gold does not remain on the surface. It is buried. Silence, for these people, functions as the earth that protects what is valuable. But here lies an important paradox. The more someone hides, the more others try to decipher them. Silence attracts curiosity. It creates an aura. It creates mystery, not intentionally, but inevitably. And this can generate unbalanced relationships. Talkative people project depth where sometimes there's only reserve. Others project coldness where there is sensitivity. Silence becomes a movie screen for the unconscious of others. That is why people who speak little need to learn, throughout life, how to balance silence, not to please others, but to protect themselves. Not every environment deserves access to one's inner world, but no human being can sustain themselves in absolute isolation. The psychological maturation of these individuals happens when they realize that silence does not need to be total. It can be selective. It can coexist with conscious, clear, and firm expression when necessary. When that happens, something powerful emerges. The person stops being merely an observer and becomes an agent. They do not lose their depth, but they gain presence. They do not abandon silence, but use it as a foundation. It is at this point that the archetype of the sage begins to integrate with the archetype of the communicator. Words begin to be used as instruments, not as emotional discharge. Speaking stops being a reaction and becomes an act. And when a person like this speaks, the environment changes, not because they impose themselves, but because they reveal, not because they dominate, but because they clarify. There's an almost surgical clarity in their words. They cut through illusions without wounding. They point things out without humiliating. This happens because these words do not come from an inflated ego, but from a deeper inner place, a place that observed, felt, digested, and only then decided to manifest itself. Modern society desperately needs this kind of person, but paradoxically, it does everything possible to silence them even more. It rewards excess, empty speech, instant opinions. It punishes pause, doubt, and reflection. That is why people who speak little eventually need to make an inner choice. Either they adapt to the noise and lose themselves, or they preserve their essence and accept the discomfort of not being understood by everyone. This choice is not simple, but defines the psychological destiny of the individual. If you are someone who speaks little, perhaps you have spent your entire life believing there was something wrong with you. Perhaps you were compared, pressured, corrected. Perhaps you learned to shrink yourself in order to fit in. But the silence you carry is not a flaw. It is raw material. The question is not whether you should speak more. The question is whether, when you speak, you will be saying something worth existing. Because, in the end, the world is already full of voices. What is missing is presence. And presence is not measured in words.